Hi everyone, thanks for coming out. Can I ask our panelists to come up to your seats in the front here? I think if you walk in front, you can see where your name tags are. Okay, so here's how the program will run. Each speaker will have about 7 minutes, so they're all going to cover different topics. What I'll do is I'll keep a 5-minute timer, and when we hit the 5-minute warning, I'll let you know, and you got 2 minutes to kind of wrap up. And when we conclude the prepared remarks by all the speakers who are going to go through a different aspect of this House Bill 4420 and the Second Amendment, then we'll have about a half hour to take questions from you in the audience. We'll have a microphone that we will set up over here. Henry, I think we've got a mic in the center for the speakers to come up so you can be heard. And then you'll have some more time at the end to come after the Q&A session and come speak to the panelists individually and go spend time with some of the vendors. So, with that, I'm just going to go right left as we go down the podium here. Again, my name is Bob Hiss. By the way, I'm also a licensed gun owner. I'm a bad trap shooter with a shotgun, so I'm aspiring to be better, but I've got a dog in this fight. So we'll start to my right with Hal Shurtleff. Hal is the founder of Camp Constitution. He's going to cover the history of the Constitution, why the Second Amendment, the importance of the Second Amendment today, and the development and importance of Camp Constitution are being engaged in the current legislative fight. So, Mr. Shurtleff, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, folks. Today is Constitution Day. Happy birthday, Constitution. Before I get into my remarks, I want to acknowledge two gentlemen that came with me. I was in a conference in Lancaster, Pennsylvania over the weekend, and we left there about 6 in the morning and got here in pretty good time. Mr. Charles Van Veek and his son, John Mark. Charles they're both from Cape Town, South Africa, so they've come a long way, a lot further than most of us in the room here. Some of you may have heard, it was 30 years ago, in July, 4 terrorists came into a church in Cape Town and murdered 11 people and wounded 53. And there was a cool-headed gentleman with a little snub-nosed .38 who fired back, and these terrorist cowards ran out of the church. And that would be Charles. And he's a missionary. He travels around Africa. He also comes, because we need missionaries here more than they need them in Africa. But he's on a speaking tour, and tomorrow he's speaking at 2 venues. Both of them are private residents. One's in Lexington at noontime, and one is in Bedford at 7 o'clock. So if you're available, you can see me. I'll give you the 177 Waltham Street in Lexington, and then the other venues on Gould Street. I'll give you the exact locations. And then he'll be in New Hampshire. He'll be in Loudon at the First Congregational Church at 11 a.m. on Tuesday, and then 7 p.m. in Alton at the Community Church of Alton. Then we head up to Worcester County. So I want to mention too, we have a weekend camp coming up, and I have some information at the last day in September to the first weekend in October, Friday the 29th to October 2nd. Well, I was asked to give a little talk on the Constitutional Convention of 1787. So I already used up 2 minutes. So it's really difficult to run it all through. But this is what we celebrate. On this day in 1787, the convention ended, and the proposed Constitution, that was before there was a Second Amendment, by the way. And I want to point out something that's very important. The Second Amendment does not give us a right to keep and bear arms. You say, wait a minute, maybe I'm at the wrong meeting, just some liberal guy. God gave us that right to keep it. That's what the founders said, that rights come from God. The purpose of government is to protect rights. I know in Massachusetts it's awful hard to be able to get a weapon. I live in New Hampshire now, and it's a whole lot easier. And our crime rate's much lower, too. Isn't it interesting? So, what happened was on July 4th of 1776, we became an independent nation. We didn't have a constitution, so they drew up something called the Articles of Confederation. And it wasn't ratified until 1781. It only had 13 articles. The last article was the way to amend it. And there were some issues with the articles. Some of them were, number 1, there was no executive. Number 2, no judicial. They seldom had a quorum. They didn't have the power to enforce anything. And there was all kinds of issues with between the states, tariffs, and navigational issues. So George Washington, known as the indispensable man when it came to this Constitution, he convened a meeting at Mount Vernon, And there was only a handful of states that showed up. A little while after that, they convened in 1786 the Annapolis Convention. And I think there was only 5 states that showed up at that point. But it was agreed that they would have a formal convention actually initially it was to amend the articles. And they met in Philadelphia in May. It was mid to late May of 1787. And by the way, we had one man that was a delegate that was born right here in Newton. His name was Roger Sherman. Now he moved to Connecticut, but he's a homeboy. We gotta give credit. He not only signed the Constitution, but he signed the Declaration of Independence, and he signed the Articles of Confederation. Very, very important founding father. And there was a lot of arguments. There was some like Elbridge Gerry. Remember that name? Gerrymand. He didn't like the Constitution. He left. He never signed it. There was a few others. George Mason. George Mason, by the way, was really a firm supporter of the right to keep and bear arms. And also, there was talk about a Bill of Rights. And there were some states that did not want to ratify the Constitution unless there were a Bill of Rights. So they promised that once ratified, they would be. Although some of the folks, like I think it was Alexander Hamilton, he said, we don't need a Bill of Rights because the Constitution that we're proposing gives limited rights, specific, spelled out. Everything else is left up to the states and to the people. We really don't need it. But he was overruled, and of course you see how they defied or they misconstrued all the amendments actually, but especially the Second Amendment. So there was arguments about how they elect the president, and I am so glad that they chose the Electoral College. These men were brilliant men, and I'm not a big math guy, but they gave us 2 fractions, 2/3 and 3/4, that are indispensable. 3/4 of the states needed to ratify an amendment. Could you imagine if we made the amending process so easy? We would have 1 million amendments, and this thing would be amended out of existence. The Electoral College, see the small states versus the big states, and they came up with this Connecticut plan that said, okay, every state will have 2 senators, and those senators will be chosen by the state legislators. That was changed. That was a big mistake, the so-called progressive era. And the other one would be based on population, the members of the House. And that passed, and they just said, how are we going to choose the president? And they said, should Congress choose the president? There were some people that supported that. They said, well, no, if we do that, then they'll be totally obligated to Congress. And how about the general election? No, they said, they didn't use the term electoral college. That came a little bit later. But can you imagine if we simply relied on the majority vote from each state? California, New York, and some of these other big liberal states would be running our country. We would have almost no say. Now, living in Massachusetts, we don't have a lot of say in national elections. Although, when was the last time a Republican won in Massachusetts? Was it Reagan? Reagan. And it was a pretty good margin, too. That doesn't mean it can't happen. So we have to be so grateful that our founders are so far-seeing that they gave us this Constitution. And by the way, sometimes I'll hear people tell me that it's obsolete. I get on radio shows a lot, and every now and then I'll get a liberal call up. It was written, in an agrarian society 200 plus years ago, and for a population of 2.5 million, it has no validity today. And I'll say to them, what amendments do you want to repeal? How about the First Amendment? The one that protects the right. What are the 5 provisions of the First Amendment? Everybody know? Do we get them all? We have a song at camp when we sing to the children sing the 5 parts of the First Amendment. And I had a reporter ask me, how do you teach the Constitution to 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds? And I showed him a video of the song. I said, that's how we do it. And I bet you they know more about it than most people that go to college. Yeah. So the Bill of Rights came a couple of years later. In 17, I want to mention too, as it was ratified, New Hampshire, Delaware was the first, most people know that, it says on their license plate. New Hampshire was the 9th, making it the law of the land. Rhode Island, 2 minutes, they never sent any delegates. So if you look at I thought I had about 100, I only have maybe 20 or 30, but if you don't have one, you're welcome to take it. When you look at the signers, You don't see Rhode Island because they never sent any delegates. They eventually ratified it, but they were, I think, the last state to ratify it. But we're kind of glad they did, you know, even though it's a small state. But then the Bill of Rights, that came in December 16th, I think it was, 1791. And there were, the last two amendments are very interesting because it basically says, we might have forgot some rights, but we can't mess with those either. You know, the things that are delegated to Congress specifically are retained to the people. Because in some countries, they list all their rights, and if they were listed, you didn't have them. And so the intent, and you hear this term, states' rights, oh, you're a neo-Confederate. No, the founders were very much in favor of, it's not a question of states' rights, it's a question of delegated authority. Congress has specific duties in the job description that they do. The president has certain job descriptions. The Supreme Court, and by the way, the Supreme Court is not the highest law of the land. It's Congress. And by the way, where are laws made? Supreme Court doesn't make laws. Although I have to say they did a good job with our case, 9-0. Christian flag. I can't complain about this current body too much. Article 1, Section 1 says all lawmaking abilities are vested in a Congress, which will consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. Every 2 years, we can have a non-violent revolution at the ballot box by voting them out. All the members of the House and 1/3 of the Senate. And that's the power that we have. And the founders gave the House, that's the people's branch. That's the most powerful branch. Why is that? They control the money. And if we remember that, and by the way, you ask the average person on the street, who's your member of Congress? They probably wouldn't know. And I think most congressmen, at least in this state, like it that way. How many doing for time?
We're about done.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I hope I get a lot in 5 or 6 minutes. God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. Shurtleff. Now we'll go from the theory to the practical with Mr. Toby Leary. Toby's a co-founder and co-owner of Cape Cod Gunworks, which is down in Hyannis. He's got a nice shop. He's going to talk about some of the work he does on educating the population, training, safety, and how to get a license. So, Mr. Leary.
Thank you very much, and I found that to be extremely helpful. I dive into the issues around the Constitution and Declaration of Independence all the time in our line of work. Believe it or not, we have something in this state especially where Congress has become a hostile actor towards our rights. And I like to start out anytime I speak about the Second Amendment with one of the documents you referenced, the Declaration of Independence. You know the thing, and you all know the thing, right? So we hold these truths to be self-evident. And I love the wording of that, self-evident, because what that is ultimately saying is it's obvious to anyone and to everyone. It's axiomatic. It's just plain obvious. So if you go against what they're about to say here, then you're insulting your own intellect, is really what it comes down to. And so we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and have been endowed by their Creator by certain unalienable or unalienable rights. Among them, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So how do you have life, how do you have liberty and the pursuit of happiness if you don't have life? If you don't have life, nothing else matters, right? You're dead, you're in the ground, you're 6 feet under, pushing up daisies. But life is something that our founders acknowledged is defensible. It is the oldest basic human right on the history of mankind, and that is the right to defend yourself against somebody who wants to impose their evil will against you, or, in our founders' case, a tyrannical government. So that is the most basic human right, is you're allowed to defend yourself. Modern technology has granted us an extremely efficient tool for the job, and our founders were brilliant enough to acknowledge that arms are going to change. That's why they didn't say you have a right to keep and bear muskets. They said you have a right to keep and bear arms. And so the point is, like Hal said, they were extremely intelligent people. And you hear a lot of people, and of course you hear it in politics as usual, that you don't need an AR-15 to go hunt deer. There's no deer wearing Kevlar vests in the woods. We hear that all the time. Again, it's an insult to your intellect to think that our founders, who had just sent King George III's troops back across the pond in creation of the greatest country in the history of mankind, wanted to write something down so that we could put food on the table. Had nothing to do with putting food on the table. There's lots of fringe benefits to the Second Amendment. Putting food on the table, sporting, trap shooting, whatever it is the fringe benefits. But that's not the intent of why we have it. So life without the ability to protect it is basically a privilege. It's not a right. It is somebody granting us certain permissions. When I became a gun owner, and I know I'm supposed to talk about how this affects me in the business world, and this is where it all starts. I became a gun owner at 18 years old. I went down to the Dennis Police Department. I applied for my license to carry on my 18th birthday. I already had my class done, I had my application filled out, and I had my check for $100. And I slid it across the table, and I was like, I'm ready to go. And they were like, we got a live one here, fellas, keep an eye on this kid. And so I was ready to exercise my right to keep and bear arms. And what I quickly found out as I was being photographed and fingerprinted and my application taken and sent to the state for extensive background checks was, this is starting to feel a whole lot more like a privilege. What happened to my right to keep and bear arms? I don't need to do this for any other right. I don't need this to go to church on Sunday. I don't need this to go, speak today. I didn't need to fill out some application and go to a 4-hour government mandated class and pay a fee and hear what I can and can't talk about at said speech I'm going to give. But that's exactly what I was being told about my Second Amendment. And I saw no government power structure that enabled Congress to do that. I'm like, wait a minute, we're the ones who give power to government here, and they're telling me what I can and can't do by illegally creating unconstitutional laws that now apply to me. So the rules have changed. Somewhere along the line, the script got flipped, and media did a very good job in a total conspiratorial way with politicians and with other people who want to take away your right to keep and bear arms. They all came together and started to beat us over the head with a mantra. It started back it started probably in the 30s with machine guns and the NFA, and then 1968 with the whole Gun Control Act, and something called Saturday night specials. Like these, we had to get them off the street. People are dying. How many more, Mr. Speaker? We heard this time and time again. When are we going to finally do something with this gun violence epidemic? And I just fast forwarded about 40 years to the latest mantra that they want to beat over our heads. You heard earlier about the governor in New Mexico who took it upon herself to suspend a portion of the Constitution. Now, she was dangling out there on the end of the limb, and someone was sawing it as it was against the trunk of the tree. And she didn't even notice, nor did she care that she was out there all in the wind by herself. But what was interesting about this is the gun control groups started to panic. You got guys like David Hogg and Ted Lieu, who are no friend of the Second Amendment, come out and say, this is unconstitutional. You can't suspend constitutional rights during a quote-unquote health epidemic, and or whatever she called it. And so the point I'm trying to make is she jumped the shark without their permission and probably did some serious damage to their movement, which is good for us in the long run, I think. As crazy it was what she did, she's called attention to something that is awful, and that is that she said the quiet part out loud, that these people hate you and they want to take your rights and they want to take your gun rights, which are not granted, so eloquently spoke of earlier, by man. They're endowed by our Creator. And so Fast forward to HD 4420, this bill being proposed today by Middlesex's finest, Michael S. Day, who did a listening tour around the state, and after not listening at all, came out with a law that basically would do the most damage to our Second Amendment of any other state in the history of our country. And ironically, if you go to the state website and look up his bio, he says that he is a civil rights advocate. He actually puts it in writing, and then proceeds to want to destroy your civil rights and wants to take them away. Now, this wasn't all his idea. He was put up to it by Speaker Mariano and whatnot. So fast forward to where we are today. I think a lot of good happened because it woke up people who didn't really care about the Second Amendment until it's deeply threatened. And it also put on notice every gun store like myself, which will basically cease to exist as a result of this law. Because if you look at it, there's no redeeming qualities of these 141-page proposed legislation. There's zero redeeming qualities. It won't make anybody safer. It will just make it harder for you to exercise your right, and it'll make it impossible for me to sell you a constitutionally protected gun. And so this paints me into a bad spot, because we have long held the idea that we know that our laws are unconstitutional. Eventually they'll work their way through the court system and we'll get vindication. The problem is this law makes it so we can no longer comply with it and stay in business. So we're faced with an uncomfortable situation where the line in the sand moment has come. And I think 600,000 gun owners and a few hundred gun dealers need to say, stop, no, this is a bridge that we're not willing to cross. We're not willing to have you, an elected official, without the right to take away our rights. You heard how hard it is to propose a constitutional amendment. You're not going to do that. You're not going to take them away. There's a line in the sand moment where we can all speak as one accord, with one accord and one voice, and say, no, we're not doing it. We will not comply. And that really is the only option at this point. We can continue to call our senators, call our legislators, call our public officials, call the governor's office and say, no, how about you comply with the Bruin decision that came down a year ago? Get the laws in order. And start, you need to comply, not us. So, anyway, I'm Toby Leary from Cape Numbers. Thank you guys so much, and look forward to answering some questions for you.
Thank you, Mr. Leary. Now we'll go to my right and hear from Lynn Roberts, who is from the Second Amendment Sisters of Massachusetts, with their table over here. Lynn's going to talk about the Second Amendment and the work she does of educating women in their Second Amendment rights. Ms. Roberts.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Yeah. All right. First, I just want to start by thanking you all for coming here today. And it is my hope that you will be motivated and informed in the challenge that is before us. It is a challenge. You just heard Toby talk about the challenge, and you're going to hear more about that from some of the other speakers. And what earlier, well, kind of changing things around in what I was going to say because of what I've heard here, which is wonderful. The people have woken up. We have an opportunity today to really fight this and win. We haven't had this many people awake as far as what's going on with legislation. And we want to keep this going, which is one of the purpose of this event here today. Earlier, somebody asked about how many women gun owners there were in the state of Massachusetts. Well, recently I did some research on the MA Firearms Record Bureau. They maintain all the records about who's applied and who got their license where they were from and what town and all, I mean, just loads of information. So I did a query looking at female gun owners from 2014, 2015, down to 2021. In 2014, there were 15,599 licenses given to women in 2014. Now, there were more than that, actually. But a lot of the data, when I was looking at it, wasn't complete. Because the town would send in the data information and wouldn't mark whether it was a male or female applicant. So I couldn't count those. So there was a lot of information that wasn't quite good enough, and I only took the information that had all the dots, the I's dotted and the T's crossed. So in 2014, there were 15,559. I'm not going to read every single year to you, but then I'll jump to 2017. There were 18,611. And then in 2020, there were 27,494. And then in 2021, now I didn't believe this. So I said, I gotta look at that again. I didn't believe this, but I was so excited. I said, yay! Yay. 32,783. I'm like, whoa. I thought maybe there was something wrong with my Excel spreadsheet. But it wasn't, so I'm like, oh my goodness. Now, to get to Second Amendment sisters. In 1999-2000, I got my license to carry. Only 20 years ago. And I'm so many years old. No. My husband's over there. I'm 78, right? I'm 78 years old, and 20 years ago, I got my license to carry. And that was such a shocker to see what I had to go to get my license, because I was so busy bringing up the family and everything. I wasn't really paying attention to the politics. I mean, I knew about the Second Amendment, but we're okay next year, I don't know, you women know how it is. When you're so busy and you're putting things on the back burner. Long story short, my kids grew up, they left the house, and I said to myself, okay, it's time then. All right, I wanted to learn how to shoot. I grew up with Roy Rogers and Dale Evans and all those kind of fun kind of stuff. I love that stuff, right? So I went out and I said, okay, what do I do? How do I get it? What goes on? Let me go buy a gun. Let me go buy a gun. And someone said to me, you can't just go buy a gun. I said, what? And they said, you got to get a permit. A permit for what? It's my right. Like Toby was saying, do you have to go get a permit to speak? Well, I was in shock. I couldn't believe it. Long story short. I met a man who was the vice president of the Braintree Rifle and Pistol Club. And I came in contact with him because I went online and I'm searching for women's groups. Women's groups, so I could join a women's group, learn how to shoot. And I couldn't find any. Then I found a group, a national group called Second Amendment Sisters. And I contacted them and they said, no, we have nobody in Massachusetts. Big surprise. Right? So I said, well, okay. They said to me, why don't you start the chapter in Massachusetts? I said, me? I don't even have a gun yet. They said, don't worry about it. I said, okay. So I didn't worry about it because something inside me was pounding. It was pounding. I said, there's something wrong here. So I had 5 names on a list that the national organization had given me. And I talked with the Braintree Club about women shooting, and they said, come on down, we'd love to have you. I didn't know what I was doing, And they said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. So, that's how it began. I got, people volunteered from the club to teach me a few things and came to my first meeting, and we started teaching ladies how to shoot. And the second event, and so from the year 2000 up to the year 2023, all right, we have a membership that's over 300. Not everybody is active, but they support us. So it's very good. We are an all-volunteer women's civil rights organization. We're dedicated to reaching out to women and educating them to dispel the myths and the misinformation that's out there. I mean, the media, what's the media, all they talk about? Oh, you gotta get, the gun violence, you gotta get the guns off the street. You know, yeah, let's pass some more laws so we can oppress the people who are not committing the crimes. That makes sense, right? Well, I gotta say, in going through all of this, one of the most satisfying things to me, and some of my other instructors, female instructors, all female instructors, is to see a woman who was nervous and unsure, nervous and unsure at the beginning, leave the range with a huge smile on her face, finally understanding. Woo! Understanding. Yeah. Not only was she knowledgeable about firearms and self-defense, she was well armed with the truth that she will carry into the voting booths. And that was my mission. That was our mission. The woman's voice is very important today, and especially years ago when all this talk about, gun violence and guns and let's restrict this and restrict that, and the women's hearts are being tugged. Oh, you gotta protect your children, you gotta get the guns off the street. And I would ask the woman, guns off the street? Okay, how many guns you got on your street? No answer. Oh, you seen any guns on your street today? No.
No, darn.
No. Oh, right. Right. So I ask you then, what are you talking about? What are you hearing? In the next few minutes that I have, I'd like to describe two things.
A few minutes.
No. 1 minute, 2 minutes.
I don't know. That's good.
So how about 30 seconds?
Okay. All right. I'm going to talk, and it has to do with HD 44420. Okay, and it's something that a fellow by the name of Edward Vieira, who is an expert on the Constitution. He wrote a book called 13 Words. And in this book, he talked about salami slicing. Salami slicing, what has that got to do with guns? Well, he says, gun control is like slicing up parts of firearms and ammunition into pieces they claim are a present danger that needs to be regulated, thus engaging in the long history of abuses meant to dispossess us of some part or all of our firearms and accessories. He wrote this in 2013. That sounds to me, where's the sound? I didn't bring it. That sounds to me like HD 4420. They want,
Here we go. Here's a sign.
that's what this is. They want to serialize parts. They want to register parts of your guns. They want to make it so that you can't walk over private property with your legal carry gun. I'm out with my kids, my grandkids, I'm carrying, and I have to worry about there's no permission sign on a person's property allowing me to walk by their property or on their property. That is what's going on with this. Okay, all right.
Good wrap up.
With the Gun Owners Action League is the Advocacy Director and Women's Programs Assistant. She's also a certified instructor with the Mass State Police, the National Rifles Association, and a new acronym for me, USCCA, which is U.S. Concealed Carry Association. She's one of the hosts of the Sisters in Arms, a firearm story on YouTube channel, so please welcome Carrie and Eau Claire.
Okay, let me turn this on. Hold on a second. Oh, am I not supposed to use this? Not now? Not now? I'm saving this for next weekend. About the end of the month. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. So I know I have only 5 minutes, and this speech is definitely a lot longer than that, so I'm going to sum it up. So I'm going to talk about my advocacy journey. So I got my license in 2015 and realized the importance of education. But not only that, I realized the importance of education for women. I started getting more and more women coming to the range and asking me, hey, I noticed that there's a group of women that are coming to the range. How can I join that? How can I be a part of that? And then I realized the importance of I need to start something. And I did, and I did, and I did. So I started a shooting chapter for women called Armed Women of America. I have 80 women now, and I can tell you firsthand, in fact, I just got a call last week from a member, her name is Laura, and she said to me, I can't thank you enough. I can't thank you enough for allowing me the opportunity to be comfortable and secure at my firearm. And you know what she did? She started her own little group. I got a bunch of 70-year-olds that go to the range every Tuesday and shoot. So tell me if that's not right. So yes, I got my plate full. I'm a mom of 2, a wife, I'm a business owner, and I'm a defender of our Constitution. I find it critical and crucial to stand here to protect that right for my children and the future of our children and our youth. And I think we all can agree upon that. I want to say thank you to Norfolk County Republican Committee for inviting me to the Second Amendment Assembly. Thank you so much for having me. This gathering isn't a mere theoretical stance, it's a deep conviction that is intertwined in my personal experiences. As I mentioned, I am a leader, state leader of Armed Women of America, and part of the DC project and a firearm instructor. All of these things combined empowers me to be here today, as scared as I am every time I come up here, and no one knows it, but right now I'm shaking, but it's okay, because it's important to be here and be a voice for those that can't, and those that can, I can be a resource for you as well. I have a couple peeps in the back that are part of my group. Hi ladies, yay, I'm so glad you're here. And Mo Palmer, yay, I'm so glad you're here. So, again, these roles enrich my understanding and underscore the pivotal role of firearm education. It is ensuring safety in our communities. I firmly believe that knowledge and firearm safety is the cornerstone for personal safety. So what drives me to my advocacy for the Second Amendment? Education is empowerment. Education is empowerment. Time and time again, as I mentioned, I have witnessed firsthand women come to me scared of a firearm and leave with that snub-nosed .38 and go to that range, and they are the best shooter ever. One of my women, Amy, she's almost 80, and she comes there and she came to me for the first time with a little snub-nosed .38. I said, oh dear God, no. Who gave you that? Someone sold it to me because it was pink. Oh, for God's sakes, are you kidding? But you know what? She's the best shooter out there. I'm so proud of her, and I wish she was here today so I could give her a big hug, because damn, she's 80 and she can rock that target. Because of this, I am actually educating the communities, and some men along the way, just saying. countering the fear and the apprehension we have as a community, thanks to the media, by the way. And now we can have a clear understanding that the guns are not bad. People are bad. We're not the bad guys. We're not doing anything wrong. But I keep getting that told to me over and over again. And you know what? I come up here over and over again, and I will till the day I die, or to the day I can't walk. But by the way, I'm walking. So, as a mother, nothing surpasses the importance of protecting my family. It is super important. And God forbid we ever had to have that moment where we had to use that firearm to defend ourselves. But you know what? It is our right. And I want that firearm on my hip if I had to use it to protect my kids. You agree? You agree? Let's spread the word. Okay, preservation of rights. We're here right now talking about this. The Second Amendment transcends the mere right to bear arms. It symbolizes preserving our intrinsic right as Americans, echoing the visions of individual freedoms and checks and balances our founding fathers championed. Correct? Everyone has a right to defend themselves, protect themselves. Firearms, you have them for many reasons, right? Hunting, competition, I can go on and on and on, but guess what? It's because we have the right to have what we deserve. Community and camaraderie. I cannot tell you how proud I am to not just be a state director for two amazing, amazing organizations. I have the absolute privilege to actually be part of GOAL now, Gun Owners Action League. And I can't tell you, I'm living my dream, and I thank Jim Wallace and GOAL every day for teaching me to be where I am right now. And here I am actually doing something and getting paid for it, just saying. I have volunteered 5-6 years of my time, and I will volunteer and keep continuing with those organizations. It is so important to have the camaraderie, and when I'm with my women, my Armed Women of America and the DC Project women, it empowers me. And I know it empowers them to empower others to spread the word. And I know I got a couple more minutes, but I'm just going to say, we already know how HD 4420 came. Representative Michael Day listens to her, right? I went to 9 out of 11. It was I had to go. I wanted to go. I traveled 3 hours away. 6 hours, actually, then one night just to be there, to be a present, so we could see my face, so we could see my ladies in teal, so we could see the ladies just there, and the men, and the people that stand up and protect our Second Amendment. He wasn't listening, I'm going to tell you that. So let me give you a little bit of a date. February 9th, this listening tour started. June 6th, it ended. June 25th, I got hurt, just saying. June 26th, the bill came out. Okay, he wasn't listening. So what have we done? We, the people, stood up, used our voices. We contacted our legislators. We contacted our town officials, selectmen, police chiefs. We spread awareness of this bill. We passed out literature and more. We, the people, got loud. Some woke up and some are still asleep. Because of you, because of your voices, we halted this bill to getting the fast lane of success. But I can assure you it's not over. It's sleeping, and it will wake up. We are awake, and I'm ready. Are you? Yeah. I want to hear it. What do we do now? Continue your efforts. Don't stop contacting. Contact them again. You contacted one, keep going, keep calling, keep emailing. Don't stop. I know I got how many minutes? Okay. All right, so I want to do something special because I'm running out of time, so if I could have you all stand up. I want to hear every single voice united. Okay, can you help me with this one? a well-regulated militia, being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. One voice is loud. Together our voices can be thunderous. Thank you for your time.
Next speaker is a certified instructor with the Mass State Police, the National Rifles Association, and the U.S. Concealed Carry Association, and the Utah Bureau of Criminal Investigations. In 2015, he started making videos of himself playing the trumpet and shooting a gun at the same time. Which I think is the source of that old phrase, never bring a trumpet to a gunfight. His gun grid videos have been watched all over the world by millions of people. In 2016, he started a YouTube channel interviewing people in their cars as they drive around the country. At Gun Rights Policy Conference in 2017, he was awarded the Defender of Liberty, and in 2019, he was awarded the Blogger of the Year. From Riding Shotgun with Charlie, let's welcome Charlie Cook.
I've got a great gig. I've got a show called Riding Shotgun with Charlie. I travel around the country hanging out with the coolest people in the firearm community. I've had the chance to travel up to Maine, down to Florida, over to California, and up to Washington State, and 30 states in between. Having a chance to interview, having interviews has given me the chance to meet and interact and become friends with people all over the country. Massachusetts does not have a monopoly on stupid gun laws. In the state of Illinois, you cannot carry with an out-of-state permit unless you are driving and you're in your car. But as soon as you step out of the car, you're breaking the law. In 2020, I filmed some shows down in Georgia. In Georgia, you can open, and at the time, you could open carry without a permit. You can conceal carry without with a permit. But at the time, you could open carry without a permit. But once you got in your car, that was considered concealed, and you couldn't do that without a permit. I've got a friend in New Jersey that's had his permit for 9 months. The judge that signed his permit does not allow him to drive with a loaded gun on him. So he loads his gun in his house, walks out to his car, unloads his gun, drives to the store, loads his gun, goes into the store, goes shopping, gets back in his car, unloads his gun, drives home, loads his gun, and then walks into his house. That is better than what he used to have, which is the shocking thing. I've got over 180 interviews and shows that I have on YouTube and in podcast form, and I've met many people around the country. Most of the folks in the gun community most of the folks I've met are absolutely wonderful people. People that become gun owners because of an incident that made them realize that they are their own first responder. People that grew up around firearms and guns were just a part of their life. People who are authors and activists who fight for our right to carry and carry firearms, and people who are instructors who pass their knowledge about firearms and self-defense onto other people. So my gig is kind of weird. I reach out to people who may not know who I am, and I ask them to forget all the stranger danger, and I ask them to hop in the car with me. They know I'm a gun guy, I know they're a gun person, and we drive around for about an hour and talk about what it is that they do in the gun community. And I've had some of the panelists up here on the show. The great thing about the people in the gun community is they're wonderful people. I've got a number of friends that are in the media that have YouTube channels and podcasts, and I can call them up and say, hey, I've got a friend that's running for the NRA Board of Directors. I'm trying to help her get elected. Would you mind putting her on your show? All right, I'll call up another friend and say, hey, I've got a friend that's instructing 1,000 women over the weekend on how to use a firearm in Detroit. Would you mind having this guy on the show? And then they gladly accept these people. Gun owners are some of the nicest people that I've met, and some of them they're more than willing to let you borrow their car to film a show. I've actually had one guy who wouldn't, his wife they didn't just let us borrow their car, but his wife actually baked cookies for us as well. That's always a nice touch. Some of the people invite me into their homes, and not just to break bread and have a drink, but also people let you stay in their house overnight. And of course, their spouses are like, who's this guy from Massachusetts, and why is he staying in our house? Like, this might seem a little strange, and like, oh, it's fine, Charlie's cool, it'll be all right. These are the people that have your back. These are the people that you can ask for advice for, and they'll steer you in the right direction. Some of these people, we live through events together when we go to these conferences and events around the country, and we'll tell stories of what happened at other events, and we just pass the stories back and forth, and I can pick up where one person left off and another person picks up their story. These are the kind of relationships that we have with each other, and all of these people are gun owners. These are not the people that our oligarchs think that they are. These are not the people that are committing crimes. These are not the people that use guns to intimidate or scare someone. These are the people who love their families and take care of them. These are the people who work hard. These are the people who help those who are in need. They're the people who will loan you a gun and give you ammunition and not ask for anything in return. Now, HD 4420 would change all of our lives if it gets passed. It's going to turn us all into felons overnight. Michael Day said he just wanted to go after goose guns, and I can't say goose guns without making a funny voice because it's a nonsense term. I did the same thing with assault weapons and high-cap magazines. But this bill does much more than that. It ups the training requirement. It puts restrictions on firearms. It's going to make the state's going to now put serial numbers on magazines. To me, this is like changing the VIN number on your car. Like, you can't do that because you didn't manufacture it. And this is what our state wants to do. It's all nonsense. It's all ridiculous. The fabulous thing is that the opposition that we're getting here for 4420 is also from non-gun owners as well. We need to get the word out to everybody, and not just the background check, law-abiding, responsible gun owners that we are. We need to support people who are going to oppose things like HD 4420. We need to support the Norfolk County Republican Committee, because these are the people that are going to put their foot down and say that this bill is not going to pass. It is absolutely wonderful to see so many people that came out here today. We're the ones that can stop this bill and have the power to stop all of this infringement, because let's face it, this bill, the licensing, the serialization, the restrictions, all of this, the gun-free zones that they're going to want us to live with, this is all infringement. Thank you.
We're going to wrap up with two members of the Gun-Oriented Action League, if I got that right. We'll start with Gun Owners Action League, pardon. We'll start with Mike Harris, who is the Director of Public Policy.
Hey everyone, I am Mike Harris. I am the Public Policy Director for the Gun Owners Action League. I'd like to be redundant for a moment. Also, I'll kind of jump off what Charlie said. I have a really cool job too. I get to yell at politicians about guns. Pretty awesome. So, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It's an important quote from an important document written by important people. People who wrote those words had just fought off the most powerful military in the world with mostly civilian arms. A fight that started just 10 miles from where we are right now. The Second Amendment was never about anything else, no matter how much the gun grabbers pick at those words and wrap themselves in tragedy, as if those who want to exercise their Second Amendment rights are somehow responsible for those tragedies. We're not. We are also peace-loving people who just want to protect ourselves. I don't know what else I can say about HD 4420 that hasn't been said already. It's a direct assault on one of our most fundamental freedoms in this country, the ability to protect ourselves and our families and defend our fundamental way of life. But I will say one thing, and it's positive. I have not seen the firearms community this active since I started with Cole 3 years ago. So Yeah, I mean, we can applaud that if we want to. However, seeing the energy come back to the Second Amendment community has been heartening and a little bit exciting because it's working. And if we can beat this here, gun control is finished in this country. It's over. So I want to thank all of you in this room and everybody else who's seeing this for your advocacy. We could not have done this without all of you stepping in and getting involved and doing everything that you could to make sure that they heard what you had to say about Beacon Hill. Let me see, I'd like to talk about Beacon Hill for a moment because I get to spend a lot of time up there. And I say get to kind of regretfully. But I am just astounded by some of the conversations I have with politicians up there. Willful ignorance is one of the most dangerous things in the world. And that coupled with a politician who has the power to take away your rights is terrifying. You know, the lack of information that a lot of these people have up there who have the ability to throw you in prison for exercising your constitutional rights is amazing. And it's scary. So one of the things we like to do, or one of the things that Goal functions as, one of our most important functions, is an information source for our members, for the general population, and especially for politicians. The people who are up there making the rules, I don't care if they're with us, against us, or neutral, I want them to have proper information about what they're talking about before it comes out of their mouths. So anytime anybody has a question for us, please call us. If any politicians are watching this, also call us. So while I'm walking around that building, I think of the men who walked those grounds. They were noble men, wealthy men, who had everything to lose, but happily sacrificed it for the cause of liberty. This bill seeks to fundamentally undo that sacrifice. You know, just thinking about the man buried in the granary graveyard at the bottom of that hill, and all of the work that he did, and the fiery rhetoric that he used, and the actions he took to back it up. Sam Adams was an incredible patriot, and we owe him a huge debt of gratitude in this state, at least. You know, it's important that we continue to keep up the pressure on our politicians right now, because it's working, like I said. They're listening to us. Jim has said this a million times. This is the first time we've ever seen a speaker stopped in his tracks. He wanted to do something, and we stopped him. And it's hugely important that we stop this at the legislative level, because once it gets passed, we need to challenge this piece by piece in the courts. And that can take a long time. And until each of those parts are dismantled and fought against, we're living under this law. We're living under the provisions of this law. So we need to do everything we can to fight against it. I also like to say that I pity the people who wrote this bill, because they live in a state of fear that I've never experienced and I never want to experience. It's the conversations we have with people out there are just astounding sometimes. So yeah, I'm going to keep it a little short, but I'm going to finish with a quote from the Dalai Lama.
Oh, jeez.
If someone has a gun and is trying to kill you, it would be reasonable to shoot back with your own gun.
Thank you for that. Dalai Lama, who knew? So our last speaker is Jim Wallace, who is the Executive Director of the Gun Owners Action League, which I got to correct this
There
time.
you
So
go.
Jim will close with you. Thanks very much.
Don't applaud, you don't know what I'm going to say. All right, if you are able to, gentlemen, please stand up and let's give all the ladies in the room a standing ovation, okay? They deserve it. History will teach us men, if we were smart, to teach you all how to shoot better than us, but we'll figure that out later. You know, I have a phenomenal partner in life, my wife Holly, and Holly's over here. Say hi, honey. I always say, behind every successful guy is a better woman rolling her eyes, and she's really good at it. But anyway, folks, the Second Amendment. Here's a funny thing about the Second Amendment and all the people who are against it and whatever else. It's the second thing we wrote. The second thing. The first thing was, you can say anything you want, but if you're going to do that, you probably ought to get a gun. The second thing we wrote. And now they want to get rid of it. What is the importance of the Second Amendment today? If you look at the full-blown attack that's happening on the Second Amendment, specifically the NRA, I don't know if any of you are familiar with what has happened with the Attorney General and the government of New York trying to shut down the NRA, literally, trying to shut it down. I'm on the board of directors on the NRA. They have kept us in court for 5 years because every time we want the judge to move forward with it, they ask for an extension. Why? So we have to spend more money. It's our money. Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, when she ran for Attorney General, she made a promise to weaponize the government under her to go after the NRA. Think about that. A public official publicly threatening to weaponize government against a group of citizens. Now, the interesting thing is, after 5 years, they couldn't find any wrongdoing from the NRA. But it got so bad, the Department of Financial Services in New York threatened every single bank and corporation who did business through the city of New York and through the state of New York, contacted every one of them and said, if you have any relationship with the National Rifle Association, we will put a financial risk letter in your folder. Threatening businesses just for being affiliated, for associating with another group. That's our government right now. And you know the problem, the biggest problem is? They have nothing to be scared of. Governor of New Mexico admitted it was unconstitutional to suspend the Second Amendment. She doesn't care. She doesn't care. There is no penalties for being a public official in violating your constitutional rights. None. You're fighting your own money. They're weaponizing the government that was supposed to protect us, to protect our rights as citizens. They're weaponizing that system to take away the rights. Now, the reason the Second Amendment is so important today, what was the original intention of the Second Amendment? And it's so funny because there are great videos out there about testimony. And it's like, well, you know, do you need that gun to, you know, AR-15, do you need that to hunt deer? Well, so far the deer aren't shooting back, but yeah, the deers aren't trying to take away my civil rights. They have completely miseducated the public on the intention, the pure intention of the Second Amendment was to ultimately control the people we put in power. And I'm often asked that question. You know, well, what gun do you think you need to have? Well, first of all, never ask me what I need. That's a dangerous question from a government, right? But think about what the Second Amendment is. To control you, the government. So what kind of gun do I need to make sure you're in control? It was kind of funny, I was debating an anti-civil rights guy one day, and he goes, you know, you ever think if it came to it, you know, your little guns are going to shoot down the airplanes from the Air Force that are going to be out there? And I said, well, there's two problems. First of all, men and women driving those planes are our friends. They hate you. But if you're going to use that example, that means we need bigger guns, right? All right, sweet. You know, It was like one time, who knows Dave Linsky from Navy? I was debating Linsky a couple of years ago on a TV show, and it was about mandatory insurance for gun owners. And I said, Dave, essentially what you're trying to do is tax a civil right. And he goes, well, we tax healthcare and that's a civil right. And I said, Dave, that's a whole nother show. Now let's not go down that road. But since you brought that up, why do we have health insurance? Get cheaper access to higher quality healthcare. Well, Dave, if you're going to guarantee my people cheaper access to higher quality guns, damn it, Dave, you got us. Let's pass that bill tomorrow. And he's like, love that stuff. But anyway, the problem that we're facing is the reason the government, our own government, is attacking the NRA right now with everything they've got. They are, if you think about this, the only citizen organization left that can stand up to the government. That's it. When they're gone, it's over. They know it's over. That's why they want them gone. Think about the tactics they're using. Our own government is turning against us. Never thought I'd say this in my entire life. They just put a former president in jail. Like him or hate him. They've never found anything that he's done wrong. But yet we got Sleepy Joe. But oh, Joe, wake up, sorry. Sleepy Joe Biden up there owns mansions. What's going on? If the Second Amendment disappears, there's no holding back. You know, I've talked about this publicly a lot. What was the scariest thing about COVID? It wasn't the BS lockdowns. It wasn't the gross masks. It wasn't even the phony vaccines. The scariest thing about COVID was government really worked hard to find their boundaries, and they didn't find any. They never found any boundaries during COVID. And thus government has changed. Ask Mike, we went up to the State House, the House debating a $58 billion budget. It was a ghost town. There was nobody there. Massachusetts State House was the last state house in the country to open back up after COVID. What does that tell you? You go back up in the State House any given day, most of the offices are locked. There's nobody there. I was up there the other day joking with somebody that said, you know, this building could house a lot of immigrants. Look at this place. You know, we threw in a couple of showers and maybe a kitchen. We're good to go, man. What the hell? You know? And if they're not going to use it, wow, imagine what we could auction that place off for. We could buy a lot of Tavors, Charlie, with that kind of money. Second Amendment is the only thing left holding us together, period. And think about this, folks, too. The experts are telling us that the next presidential election, first time in U.S. history, that the majority of eligible voters will pay no federal income tax. Think about that. They will have, the majority of the voters will have no stake in the game. Why do you think they're flooding our country with impoverished? Because they have no stake in the game. You've got a stake in the game. And I'm going to tell you one thing right now. A lot of the question is, if we're not careful, we're going to lose America. We've already lost it. I'm sad to say. America's gone. The question is, how do we get it back without pulling the trigger? And that's what they're afraid of. Thanks, folks. There's no such thing as gun rights.
That's right.
I hate that term.
Gun violence.
There's no such thing as gun rights. They're civil rights. They're actually inalienable rights, but ask how, most people don't know how to spell that, never mind know what it is. So at what point do we as a citizenry say, we're done? Pass anything you want. We're done. And you know why it hasn't happened? Because we know what comes next. Unlike the other idiots that think they are so downtrodden, we know. And I'll tell you this, should have said it when I was talking. If there is any marginalized group of people in Mass, it's the 2A community. We're the only community in this state that faces outright bigotry and oppression from our own government. They would never dare to do this to any other community in the state because the Capitol building would be on fire. But we know what happens when they cross that line and we say, we've had enough. The world as they know it would end. The world as we know it would end. We know the cost of freedom. We're prepared for it, but it's the last measure. It's not the first. We don't start burning cities because we're a little bit pissed. And if they think January 6th was an insurrection, that was one of the worst things I've seen in history. So if they think that was an insurrection, whew. But sir, that's the big question. Is it okay for us to try to follow the laws until we can't? Yeah, because we do have a system in this country. The problem is if this passed, until we kind of alluded to, you could not comply with this. That's the way it was designed. It would be impossible to comply with everything that's in there. Also, there was a huge liability on the state's end for logistics to deal with all this extra stuff. There was no money in the bill. They had no intention of creating the bureaucracy that would have been necessary for us to comply. Therefore, even if we wanted to, we couldn't. That was their mission.
There's a thing called nullification, where states will nullify unconstitutional laws at the federal level. By the way, we have a state constitution, part the first, where you have the right to keep their arms, and you have the right to defend your household. So let's learn about our own state constitution, which predates the US Constitution. And the gentleman asked about changing the Second Amendment. Gavin Newsom, boo hiss, come on, boo hiss, thank you. He's proposing in Article 5 convention to do just that, the 28th Amendment. And there's been a movement afoot, and some people in this room may support thing called an Article 5 convention. Some people refer to it as a convention of states. But there are people behind the scenes that would love to make a profound impact on that Second Amendment. But I'm optimistic. I think we're winning the debate on the Second Amendment. Look at all the constitutional carry states we have. Look at all the people that are getting gun permits, although we really shouldn't have to get a gun permit because this Constitution is our gun permit. So we're making a lot of progress. And don't let the media and the left-wing politicians discourage you. I think we're winning in many respects on this debate. Maybe not so much in Massachusetts, but if we can turn the tide here, and look what happened in New Mexico, which is a pretty left-wing state. The weak governor said, I'm going to violate the Constitution. Nobody is enforcing it. Even the Democrats in her party aren't enforcing it. She looks like a complete weak idiot. Let's make more of these politicians look like weak idiots when we stand up for our rights.
I think I'll move the mic to the speakers. Yep, this will go over here. How about I hand this to you?
All right, that works.
You can just keep it for a minute or two.
I just wanted to speak a little bit to what you were saying earlier about being forced to follow unconstitutional laws. So in law school, they teach you one of the things you consider, or that is considered when they're discussing the law when it pertains to sentencing and things like that is legislative intent. And I view the Declaration of Independence as the ultimate legislative intent. And if you look at the first couple sentences of the second paragraph, where it says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed," and here's the fun part, "that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of those ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government." So I would say yes.
Yeah, and real quick along those lines, there's a various saying that goes back to the 1830s that about the 4 boxes of liberty. I'm sure you've all heard it. It's the soap, ballot, jury, and ammo. Please use in that order. And like Jim said, that is, those of us who I have complied with unconstitutional laws for the past 9 years of being a gun store owner, because I felt it was better to be in the game and wrong and be able to make subtle changes over time than to put my foot down and say not be infringed and go to jail and not be able to make a difference. This is that moment in time for me, personally. I know that's not everybody, because there's people that come into my shop and go, "I want to sell this gun." And I'm like, "Why do you want to sell this gun?" "Because if this bill passes, I won't be able to keep it." And I'm like, man, we've lost already.
Yep.
We have lost if that's how people are thinking. We don't get permission from the government. We give permission to the government. It's a one-way separation of powers, not from government to us. It's the other direction. There's check valves in the way, so they can't infringe upon our rights. So what I said earlier has consequences to what I said. When I spoke a couple weeks ago in Quincy, I actually took it a step further and said, in this case, I am willing to go to jail over this, because they will effectively shut me down. So I have 2 choices. It's a bifurcated road. One says, comply and get shut down. The other one says, don't comply and probably get shut down. So what do I want to do at this point? I want to be on the right side of history. And I want to stand up for what is right. I want to stand up for the Constitution, and I want to stand up for the rights that they don't have the authority or the legal ability to take away. So for that reason, I am willing to be arrested for non-compliance of said Bill HD 4420.
There's one right behind you, Liz has it.
Nice hat.
Thank you. I don't know if there's an answer to this, but I asked a friend who is an attorney. A police officer is a public official, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And a police officer can be prosecuted for violating a citizen's civil rights, yes or no? Yes. So if a police officer can be prosecuted for violating a citizen's civil rights, why can't any other public official be prosecuted?
I think we may have an answer. You want to try that answer?
Mike would be better at
Mike,
that.
Mike, do you know that policy?
Immunity. Mike went to law school.
So, legislators are granted immunity for what they say on the floor in debate, which includes the laws that they pass. Unfortunately, I don't agree with it. I know that sucks, but that's kind of where that comes out. And I don't think it's really been truly been litigated yet.
I think it needs to be tested.
I don't disagree.
Because the New Mexico governor, and that's the basis of the conversation.
Sure.
The New Mexico governor obviously violated the Heller and McDonald decisions, obviously. So it was an intentional violation of civil rights for her people.
Yeah.
So why can't she be prosecuted for that? And I think she should be.
I think
and it should be a test.
I think that's a question that hasn't been answered yet. I I think you're preaching to the choir on this one. I anticipate that attempt being made, and I'm intellectually curious to see what happens, and I'm also hoping they throw a big giant book at her and make her an example.
Thank you.
Is that it?
We have another response, Richard.
Richard, one of the problems we have faced, for a long time is violation of civil rights. It depends upon who's determining what a civil right is. Now, we should know that. We do know that, right? Simple reading of the Constitution, Bill of Rights, we know what it is. You got to understand, until not maybe 10 years ago, the highest court in Massachusetts did not, I'm going to move because this thing's echoing, did not recognize an individual right to keep and bear arms. They didn't. Matter of fact, Hal mentioned in Article 17, part of the first, the right to keep and bear arms in Massachusetts. Until just a few short years ago, the highest court in Massachusetts viewed that as a right of the state, not of the right of the person. Famous case, 1976, Commonwealth v. Davis, that the individual did not have the right to keep and bear arms, that it was the right of the state. The militia was in fact the National Guard, not the individual. And just a few short years ago, when Martha Coakley was Attorney General, does anybody know the history of the Colfax Courthouse Massacre in the 1800s? It's a case, legal case called Crookshank. 100 freedmen, black men, were murdered by the Klan because they were protecting the polling places. 100 people murdered. Went all the way up to the Supreme Court. In the Crookshank case at the time, in order to protect the Klan, the highest court in the United States ruled that the individual did not have freedom of speech, did not have the right to keep and bear arms. Those were rights of the states, not rights of the people. Just about 10 years ago, when we had a case before the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, Martha Coakley still said Crookshank was the law of the land.
Oh my God.
10 years ago. Can you imagine if the minority community actually knew what that meant in the city of Boston? One Ashburton Place would be one heck of a Roman candle. Woo! So that's the problem we have. It's like, Hal and others, great at teaching the Constitution, Bill of Rights the way it's supposed to be taught. But it's like, remember, depends upon who's teaching it. Barack Obama was a constitutional scholar professor. Seriously? So it all depends upon who's determining what that civil right is, and that's our biggest fight in this state.
Thank you. So by the way, we have to be out of here by, I think, 5:30 tonight, Richard, is that right? And we wanted to give you time to go up and talk to some of the panelists and see. So I'll take one or two more questions. We'll wrap it up. You can grab a sandwich, mingle with the vendors, come talk to the panelists, and we've got an exit in about 23 minutes. So Richard, over to you.
Good. Question for any one of you. I went online, and this is the House Bill, House HD 4420. This is only 8 pages. This is a 140-page document. Just on what I read in these 8 pages is enough to scare the living life out of anybody. It's really horrendous. If you really want to understand what this says, go online and read it, and you'll understand what they've all been talking about.
So Richard, what's the question?
So here's the question. How many groups are out there besides Gun Owners Action League, for example?
Gotta hold the mic up.
Besides Gun Owners Action League, how many other groups are out there fighting against this? And the second part of that question, and are they all cooperating with one another, or is everybody doing their own thing? And then, who are the legislators that are working with you to get this thing shut down?
So who knows that? Two-part question. Which groups are working on this and are they coordinated? And second, which legislators are in opposition? Well, you haven't spoken yet, so please.
I'm not getting in her way.
I'm just commenting on the groups out there, because I know there's several groups. I know the NRA, I know that the Second Amendment, Foundation. Yep, and there's a few other groups, but I'm only making a statement because I think it's really, really important to support groups like the DC Project, like GOAL, like Connecticut Defense League. Even though they're not in Massachusetts, it's important that we support each other as groups, because when something comes up like this, HD 4420, we work together. And we make sure that everyone else is aware of stuff. The more people that know and the more people that help out as groups, the more important it is. So definitely support those local groups in your town.